it took less than 8 seconds to fall, it took more than a century to be worth falling. Every week in Tasmania alone, more than 100 tons of newspapers are delivered. Newspapers printed on paper made from the wealth of the Tasmanian forests. Perhaps no manufacture is consumed so profusely as paper. Thousands of tons of newsprint and better quality papers from Tasmanian mills are devoured each day by the presses of Australia. And for each 100 tons, a dozen trees must fall. From paper to pegs, wood has 1,000 uses. In many areas, wood supports our power and telephone lines. It carries the iron road. To meet the incessant and increasing demands of the hardboard mills, the plywood mills, the paper and pulp mills, the carpenters, the contractors, the case builders and cabinet makers, the trees must fall. Few people realize the importance of the Tasmanian forests to the state economy. The value of the output of the wood industries is over £30 million per year and increasing. They're second only to agriculture in employment of labour. The population increase of this century has brought a world shortage of timber, but Tasmania is in a fortunate position. Of all the Australian states, it has by far the highest proportion of its area under forest. This map shows the main locations. There are some 25 local species of eucalypts, about 8 of which supply the basic materials for the newsprint and wood pulp industries. Of these, 3 are marketed collectively as Tasmanian oak, and considered the equal of any hardwood timbers in the world. They're in great demand both here and abroad. Once it was that more trees were burned than put to use, for fire is the ancient enemy of the forest. In past times, great fires could storm unchecked. Fires can reduce forests to worthless areas of scrub and bracken. It takes a long time to produce a good mill log, at least 70 years. This is the central problem of the timber economy. The answer is forest management. The Forestry Commission is responsible for this management, the development, exploitation and protection of these valuable assets. The work has a scientific and factual basis, beginning with a thorough assessment of our timber potential. Aerial photographs show the different types of mature forest and regrowth in remarkable detail, and from these maps and charts can be compiled. The maps become the basis for comprehensive field surveys, wherein sample areas of mature forest are marked off and the trees carefully measured. It's a long and arduous job, but we'll discover just what potential there is for further industries. There are 2 main sources of indigenous woods: the regrowth, which has followed the early logging operations, which were naturally in the easier, more accessible areas, and the old growth areas yet untapped. Much has to be done to bring these areas into use. access roads must be located and constructed. The Forestry Commission is responsible for the construction and maintenance of hundreds of miles of such roads, and tracks for bushmen and firefighters who also need lookout towers and means of communication which calls for miles of telephone wires and a reliable radio system.
This is Dody's Hill.
The Forestry Commission also has to provide fire breaks and water storage, for no summer passes without its threat of fire. Forestry men also use fire. By controlled burning done in safe weather and with fire lines where needed, areas of fire hazard are made less dangerous. In certain types of forest, fire is used to get a good stocking of seedlings for the next crop. Another aspect of Forestry Commission work is the establishment of softwood plantations. Exotic pines like these radiata from the Monterey region of California were first introduced in Tasmania by early gold miners and sea captains. Today, there are 12 plantations, totaling many thousands of acres, some under hardwoods, but mostly of radiata pine and Douglas fir. These require constant attention, removing competing scrub, pruning and thinning. Apart from the annual hazard of fire, young pines are subject to damage and destruction by rabbits, wallabies and other pests. Among these is the Cyrex wasp. Settlers used wood from the day they landed. Tent poles, firewood, palings, squared timbers, then pit-sawn timbers. With the continued utilization of the forests, the clearing of large areas for farms, and the inroads made by fire, there was public agitation for a forest service, formed in 1920. Since the Second World War, there's been a marked increase in forestry activity. Plantations now cover 20,000 acres, and over 2 million acres of crown lands have been dedicated as state forests. The assessment and development of these rich resources, their protection from fire and other enemies of nature, the meeting of the increasing demand of the building industries, and the satisfaction of the demands of the wood pulp industries are tasks of the Forestry Commission, who know indeed that in Tasmania at least, money does grow in trees.